The whole country is under an extreme cold wave today with heavy snowfall on the west coast and in the south, including Jeju. The cold snap is likely to continue throughout the week. South Korea's Supreme Court today upheld two lower court rulings that ordered Japanese firms to compensate Koreans forced into wartime labor, some 10 years after the suits were filed. Against this backdrop, Korea and Japan today held their long-stalled high-level economic dialogue. A long overdue budget for next year was approved today at the National Assembly. That's worth $500 billion with more investment in R&D. It's December 21st, 2023. This is Newscenter.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. The whole country is under a cold wave today with heavy snowfall on the west coast and in the south. Our Lee Soo-jin is live in Gwanghwamun, Seoul. Soo-jin, what's it like there? How cold?
In short, Chungmin, it's very cold. The Arctic cold wave has swept across the nation, and it feels like the entire country is stuck in a freezer. Right now, the temperatures are at -9 degrees Celsius, and morning temperatures in Seoul on Thursday morning plummeted to -14 degrees Celsius, marking the coldest morning this winter so far. And the feels like temperature dropped to -22.3 degrees Celsius. Even on Jeju Island, located in the far south of the Korean peninsula, temperatures there have fallen below 0 degrees. The highest daytime temperatures in the majority of the country were below 0, and this cold is expected to continue until Saturday morning. Let's take a listen to how cold people in Seoul are feeling.
I didn't really notice the cold up to 2 days ago, but today my ears and nose feel like they're frozen.
I arrived in Seoul on 18th of December, and I think today is the coolest.
Looks freezing cold. Soo-jin, what about other parts of the country?
Well, Jong-un, the bitter cold season is definitely being felt by the entire country. Heavy snowfall warnings are in effect for the west coast of Chungcheongnam-do province and the Jeollado provinces. There have also been many reports of water meters freezing. According to the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters on Thursday, as of 11 p.m. on Wednesday, a total of 72 cases have been reported, including 26 in Seoul, 37 in Gyeonggi-do province, and 3 in Incheon. Earlier, the Ministry of Interior and Safety also upped its heavy snow warning level from caution to alert starting at 8 p.m. on Wednesday, raising the emergency response from level 1 to level 2. Heavy snow is continued to be in the forecast for western coastal areas and the southern resort island of Jeju Island, where heavy snow of up to 30 centimeters is expected until Thursday night. Over Hwasa Mountain on Jeju Island, there was an accumulation of snow of up to 53.6 centimeters from yesterday until 1 p.m. today, and access to all 7 trails around the mountains has been closed off. At Jeju International Airport, a total of 77 flights have been delayed due to strong wind warnings. The slippery roads have already led to accidents. At 3:30 a.m. on Thursday, 9 vehicles, including a cargo truck and an intercity bus, collided on a highway in Chungcheongnam-do province, leaving the driver dead and 10 injured. At 5:37 a.m. in Jeju Island, a car skidded into a ditch and injured the driver. The KMA says a severe cold is expected to continue until Saturday morning, while the Interior Ministry has vowed to do all to minimize damage from the heavy snowfall and respond immediately, mobilizing all the resources that are available. And that's all I have for now. Back to you, Chungmin.
Our Lee Soo-jin live from Gwanghwamun Square. Thank you. Stay safe. South Korea's top court today upheld rulings that ordered Japanese companies Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and Nippon Steel to compensate the Korean victims of wartime forced labor some 10 years after those suits were filed. Correspondent Choi Min-jung explains.
South Korea's Supreme Court has once again ruled in favor of Korean victims of forced labor during Japan's colonial rule between 1910 to 1945. The top court on Thursday upheld rulings that ordered 2 Japanese firms to compensate the victims. Japan's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and Nippon Steel are ordered to pay a maximum of 150 million won, or around $115,000 to each victim. Combined with extra damages for the delay, they are ordered to pay around $900,000 in total. A total of 11 plaintiffs won the ruling, 4 against Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and 7 against Nippon Steel. However, all the plaintiffs have died of old age since the lawsuit was first filed 9 years ago. Thursday's rulings were the first such outcomes by the top court since 2018. Back then, the South Korean court made landmark rulings on separate forced labor cases, ordering the two Japanese companies to compensate other former Korean victims. The 2018 ruling soured relations between South Korea and Japan, as Tokyo argued that related issues were completely settled under a 1965 bilateral agreement. Japan's reaction is not much different this time around.
These rulings are in clear violation of Article 2 of the Japan-Korea Claims Agreement and are extremely regrettable and absolutely unacceptable. We have protested this matter to South Korea.
As the defendants Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and Nippon Steel are likely to continue refusing to pay the compensation, the government is expected to compensate the victims using funds procured through a public foundation. The plan was announced earlier this year to improve relations with Japan.
In line with the government's compensation plan announced in March, we plan to pay the compensation and damages for delay through the Foundation of Victims of Forced Mobilization by Imperial Japan.
With such a plan already in place and taking into account Japan's continued denial, it's unlikely that the Japanese firms will pay the compensation themselves. The Japanese companies have yet to pay the previously ordered compensation, claiming the statute of limitations has passed. But for the very first time, the court on Thursday clarified that this would not be allowed. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
And against this backdrop, Seoul and Tokyo today revived a long-stalled economic dialogue with a focus on supply chain and technology cooperation. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji has the details.
For the first time in 8 years, the foreign ministries of South Korea and Japan held high-level economic talks. They took place at South Korea's Ministry of Foreign Affairs on Thursday afternoon, led by the Deputy Foreign Minister for Economic Affairs, Kang Jae-kwon, and Japan's Senior Deputy Foreign Minister, Keiichi Ono. The two sides are likely to have discussed issues on economic security, such as supply chain and technology cooperation. Eyes are on whether the discussion extended to the lawsuit filed against Japanese companies by Korean wartime forced labor victims, or South Korea's import ban on Japanese seafood originating from Fukushima. This is the 15th time that the two countries have held economic dialogue after it was first launched in 1999 to discuss comprehensive economic cooperation. It was last held in January 2016 in Tokyo. The Japanese government postponed the meeting in late 2016 when a statue of a girl symbolizing Korean victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery was built in front of the Japanese consulate in South Korea's port city of Busan. The meeting remained suspended as bilateral relations between Seoul and Tokyo worsened over several issues stemming from Japan's colonial rule of Korea before and during World War II. Then bilateral relations started to improve starting March this year, after South Korea announced its plan to compensate victims of Japan's wartime forced labor. And the leaders of the two countries agreed in July to resume the high-level economic dialogue by the end of this year. The Foreign Ministry expressed hope of further improvements in bilateral relations, saying the talks could become an opportunity for the two countries to move toward a future-oriented relationship. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, across the border, there has been more hostile rhetoric from North Korea as Kim Jong-un vows to resort to nuclear weapons to retaliate if provoked with nuclear weapons. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Kim Jong-sil reports.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and his daughter Chue on Wednesday took pictures with the missile bureau that carried out a launch drill for the Hwasong-18 intercontinental ballistic missile on Monday morning. This is according to the North State-run Korean Central News Agency on Thursday. There, the leader encouraged the missile bureau and said North Korea would not hesitate to carry out a nuclear attack if the enemy provokes it with nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, Kim Yo-jong, the younger sister of Kim Jong-un, issued a statement on Thursday in response to the UN Security Council emergency session that followed the North's missile launch. She said North Korea is, quote, deeply offended and strongly condemns the meeting, saying the UNSC is hosting conferences criticizing North Korea's right to self-defense. In response to Kim Yo-jong's remarks, a South Korean Unification Ministry official told reporters on the same day that North Korea is refusing to be part of a normal international community by repeatedly violating UN Security Council resolutions, an obligation under the UN Charter that all member states must abide by. The official also added that the South Korean government maintains the same stance that the North's regime would see an end if it were to use a nuclear weapon. Over at the National Assembly, where the National Defense Committee meeting took place, Defense Minister Shin Won-sik reiterated his stance to respond strongly against Pyongyang's continued military provocations.
North Korea has violated the September 19 military agreement around 3,600 times. The only thing that can curb North Korea's unwavering ambitions is great power.
The minister added that the South Korean military is maintaining a strong ROK-US alliance against Pyongyang's provocations. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
A notable change was spotted in South Korea's foreign policy in the year 2023. Looking back on the past year, I had a chance to talk to VOA correspondent Jessica Stone and Japan correspondent for the Straits Times Walter Sim earlier. Take a look. Jessica, first, back in April, Presidents Yoon and Biden adopted the Washington Declaration, and in August, they cemented their trilateral cooperation with Japan's Prime Minister Kishida through the Camp David principles. How does Washington assess its renewed relationship with Seoul and Tokyo, and what does it mean for the U.S. to align its collective efforts with allies and partners at a time when the stakes are high on the Korean Peninsula and around the world?
Well, we are seeing a deepening of the relationship, not only between the U.S. and South Korea, but between the U.S., South Korea, and Japan, because throughout the year, we've seen a series of meetings throughout the government. So according to the U.S., these alliances are critical. They're a critical part of countering North Korea's military and nuclear program, as well as its space satellite activities. Allegations that North Korea is providing weapons to Russia, which Moscow denies, in its fight against Ukraine. And allies are preparing for more North Korean threats in 2024. And so these are all kinds of reasons why the deepening of these ties, not just because of what's happening on the Korean Peninsula, but also because of North Korea's weapons proliferation around the world.
Right, there is a host of issues. And Walter, the relations between Seoul and Tokyo marked a turning point in March. By that, I meant the better trade relations and the two leaders' frequent meetings. What's the atmosphere in Tokyo like regarding a thaw in the bilateral relationship this past year?
Well, the atmosphere has definitely been very positive. So Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida obviously sees South Korean President Yoon as a foreign leader whom he can trust over their multiple meetings, as you pointed out. But of course, there are still obstacles to their relationship, such as the South Korean court ruling this month that ordered Tokyo to pay about 200 million won to each of the 16 comfort women defendants. But the fact that the news cycle has, at least in Japan, really moved on suggests that the government wants to really manage its ties with South Korea to prevent relations from worsening. Of course, this positive mood has spillover effects. It has really benefited cultural ties. So we see Korean food, Korean culture, Korean music, K-pop becoming extremely popular in Japan, I think.
And Walter, the leaders often describe North Korea's provocations as unprecedented this year. There was a rare Kim Jong-un Putin summit in September. Ever since that, Pyongyang's military ties with Moscow have gotten closer than ever. That really culminated with North Korea launching a military spy satellite with help from Russia as it continues to advance its nuclear and missile programs, as well as cyber threats. What are the power dynamics in East Asia like, involving China and Russia? Where does the Seoul, Washington, Tokyo security cooperation stand in this region?
Well, there definitely is cause, and I don't think the leaders were, overstating the threat when they described Pyongyang's provocations as unprecedented. So definitely there is a lot of room, as Jessica mentioned earlier, for very close security collaboration and coordination in the region between South Korea, the US, as well as Japan. But if I may add on to that, I also do see Japan and South Korea hoping to maintain stable relations with China. And this is obviously evident from their recent trilateral foreign ministers meeting in Busan. That ended in a pledge for a leader summit meeting as soon as possible. As Jessica pointed out, if tensions were to rise even further over the Taiwan Strait, Japan and the United States would surely want to involve the South Korean security apparatus even more, alongside the US forces in South Korea, to help contain tensions over the Taiwan Strait as well.
Jessica, eyes are on the 2024 U.S. presidential election. How might the election results affect its bilateral ties with South Korea and the three-way cooperation with Japan? Are we going to see a dramatic change in policy regarding the Korean Peninsula depending on the election results?
I think the linchpin to answer that question is whether or not Joe Biden wins, in which case we'll see a continuation of the existing policy of deepening alliances throughout the Indo-Pacific between the U.S. and its Indo-Pacific partners. But if Donald Trump wins, who is the leading nominee in the Republican fight, we're likely to see some possible changes, particularly in the U.S.-South Korea relationship.
Walter Shim, Japan correspondent of the Straits Times, and Jessica Stone, correspondent of Voice of America. Thank you for your time. For more and what to look forward to in 2024, you can check out the whole story on our year-end special program on the last day of December at 11 p.m. Korea time. South Korea's National Assembly has passed a budget bill for 2024 that's been long overdue due to partisan disputes, particularly over cuts in research and development. Moon Hae-ryun has the details.
After months of debate, the country's spending plans for the coming year are set. The National Assembly passed the budget bill in a plenary session on Thursday. While the statutory processing deadline was almost 3 weeks ago, the two rival parties had failed to reach an agreement until now. There's been several changes made to the proposal submitted by the Finance Ministry in August, from the total budget to how much has been allocated to each sector. The total budget is some 656.6 trillion Korean won, or roughly $500 billion US. But that's around $180 million lower than the proposed amount. Fiscal soundness is becoming increasingly important due to the country's rising debt to GDP ratio. The projected debt to GDP ratio for 2024 is 51%. As a result, the government proposed cutting the budget for the R&D, education and public administration sectors to reduce spending. But the unprecedented slash in the research and development sector sparked debate, as it's the first time since 1991 that R&D has seen a decrease compared to the year before, with the proposed budget seeing a 16.6% drop from 2023. The final budget saw increases in budgets for science and technology, industry, SMEs and energy, social welfare and transport, but drops in public administration and local government budgets, as well as a decrease in the national defense budget compared to the proposal. The budget bill proposed earlier this year had a focus on strengthening social welfare, and this was reflected in the final spending plan for 2024. There was a concentration on supporting young people in particular. An additional $53 million designated for extending housing support for young people, and nearly $17 million for an initiative to give young people discounts for using public transport. It's not just young people, however, who will be benefiting from the changes in the budget proposal. An extra $4.3 million has been added to support farmers and fishermen with their electricity bills, and the pension system for the handicapped will see the biggest rise since 2013 with an additional $21 million. Meanwhile, the development project in the reclaimed wetland area of Saemangum was another major point of contention, and the two parties agreed to increase its budget by $230 million. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Justice Minister Han Dong-hoon has stepped down from his post and accepted the ruling People Power Party's proposal to chair its Emergency Leadership Committee. This is according to the party's floor leader and its acting chairman Yoon Jae-ok on Thursday. It's expected the official appointment will take place on Tuesday and the launch of its committee within this year. This follows the resignation of the former party leader Kim Ki-hyun under pressure to regain voter confidence ahead of the general election in April. The main opposition Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung congratulated Han and said he hopes Han will thoroughly fulfill his responsibility as leader. Elsewhere, hopes for a humanitarian halt in combat have been rendered uncertain as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterates his intentions to fight until all Hamas militants are down. Jin tells us more.
On Wednesday, amid reports about a possible deal between Israel and Hamas for a second humanitarian pause in Gaza, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in a televised statement that the war would end only with Hamas eradicated, all hostages freed, and Gaza no longer posing a threat. In the statement, he also vowed to eradicate Hamas, saying that the militant group has two options: surrender or die.
We are continuing the war to the end. It will continue until Hamas is eliminated, until victory. All Hamas terrorists, from the first to the last, are dead men walking. They have only two possibilities: surrender or die.
Netanyahu said his defense forces are continuing to strike the militant group with heavy fire, adding that those that help Hamas will also be targeted. Meanwhile, on Wednesday, a UN Security Council vote on a resolution to expand humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip and ask the UN to monitor the humanitarian aid deliveries there was postponed at the request of the United States. This is the third time the resolution has been delayed. According to Reuters, the vote has been repeatedly postponed due to differences of opinion among members over the text of the draft. The resolution was drafted by the United Arab Emirates with the aim of diluting Israel's control over all humanitarian aid deliveries to some 2.3 million people in Gaza. Currently, Israel monitors the limited humanitarian aid and fuel deliveries to Gaza through the Rafah crossing from Egypt and the Israel-controlled Kerem Shalom crossing. Washington is standing by its tradition of shielding its ally Israel from UN action. The vote on the resolution is now set to take place on Thursday. According to Gaza's health ministry, also on Wednesday, the death toll in the Gaza Strip has surpassed 20,000 since Israel began bombarding the enclave more than 10 weeks ago. The Gaza government's media office says at least 8,000 children and 6,200 women are among those killed. Since the collapse of a 7-day truce on December 1st, the war has entered a more intensive phase. Ground combat had previously been confined to the northern half of the Gaza Strip, but has now spread to cover almost the whole length of the region. Jin, Arirang News.
The fierce Arctic cold wave has remained for the whole day. In addition, the wind is bringing the wind chill temperatures down. The strongest cold wave of around -15 degrees Celsius will continue tomorrow and will stay until the day after tomorrow. The number of winter illnesses is increasing rapidly in this freezing winter. Please take care. Heavy snow is forecast on the west coast and Jeju Island. By tomorrow, more than 60 centimeters of heavy snow is expected in the mountainous areas of Jeju Island and more than 40 in western Jeollabuk-do province. The western part of Jeollanam-do province and the west coast area of Chungcheongnam-do province will also receive more than 20 centimeters of snow. Lows in Seoul tomorrow will start off at -15 degrees. Daily highs in Seoul will get up to -7, Daegu and Gyeongju -2 degrees Celsius. Snow on the west coast will continue until tomorrow, and Jeju Island will have snow throughout the weekend. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
And that is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session is up next.